Okay, thanks very much, everyone, for joining us, and we will get started now. My name is Steve Kenzie. I'm the Executive Director of the UN Global Compact Network UK, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the final session in our six-part Transitioning to a Circular Economy webinar series. Today, we will be discussing the circular economy in the context of the fashion and textiles sector. Before we get started, a bit of housekeeping. The session is being recorded. The recording will be made available after the session ends. So you can look forward to that. We'll also send around some key takeaways and other comms coming from us. The session is in webinar mode, and that means that you will not be able to unmute yourselves or share your video during the program. But we're still really keen to hear from you and have you actively participate. And so I'm seeing already many of you are taking us up on the offer to say hi in the chat box, and that's fabulous. Please go ahead and do that. And as I said earlier, if you want to share your LinkedIn profile, share the weather, that's great. We're happy to have that happening. We're going to have a good opportunity to pose questions to our panelists at the end of the presentations. And to manage that, we ask you to submit your questions into the Q&A box as opposed to the chat box. So at the bottom of your screen, you will see a button that you can open up a Q&A box. And please put your questions for the panelists there. But it doesn't end there. Even if you don't have a question, we really would encourage you to keep an eye on the Q&A box. We usually get more questions than we have time to answer. And so we really appreciate your support in giving a thumbs up to the questions you'd like us to prioritize. And that way we can ensure that we are spending our time talking about the issues that are most important to you. So just to recap, comments in the chat box, questions in the Q&A box, keep an eye on the Q&A and give a thumbs up to the questions you'd like us to prioritize. And just again, a final word on this. If you put a question in the chat, we can't move it over to the Q&A. The system doesn't allow the moderators to ask questions of themselves in the Q&A. So we need you to do it. So it's just easier for all concerned if we keep that straight. Okay. We've activated the automatic captions. You should have a message on your screen to instruct you how to turn those on. There's another button at the bottom of your screen to let you turn those on if you need them. Please bear in mind, though, that it's all automatic, so typos are not our fault. And finally, if you'd like to post on social media about the session, please make sure to tag us and use the hashtag T2C E2023. Our social media tags are posted in the chat, and we certainly would appreciate you helping to amplify what we're doing here today. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. As I said at the top, this webinar is being brought to you by the UN Global Compact Network UK. We are part of the Global Compact, which is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative with more than 21,000 participating companies globally. Our initiative is built on a foundation of 10 universal principles for responsible business that have been drawn from UN treaties in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. To join our initiative requires a commitment from your CEO to operationalize our principles throughout your organization, to report annually on your progress towards this end, and to support the wider UN agenda. Our role as a UK network is to support UK-based participants in the initiative to fulfill these commitments. And we do this by organizing over 100 engagement opportunities every year to inspire and enable corporate sustainability. If your company is not already participating in the UN Global Compact, please do get in touch. There's information in the chat to help you learn more about us. And for those of you that have dialed in from other countries, we have Global Compact networks almost everywhere. So you would have an opportunity to engage closer to home as well as with us. All right, thank you. And let's go on to our next slide. I mentioned that part of the commitment in joining Global Compact is to support the wider UN agenda, and that is best expressed through the UN Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the SDGs. And a big part of our mission here in the UK is to drive business engagement with this agenda. The goals provide a comprehensive and coherent roadmap to create the future we want, and business has a big role to play in achieving them. I encourage you to think about how your work impacts the SDGs, and to that end, I would just like to flag that today's session is particularly linked to Goal 12, which calls on us to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Of course, the goals are quite interlinked, and several more are highly relevant, and you can see the ones that we think are most relevant on the slide, but you're certainly welcome to connect this conversation into other goals if you wish. Okay, today's session, we're going to be focusing in on the importance of adopting the principles of a circular economy for the fashion and broader textiles markets. To help us, we are joined by a fantastic panel of speakers. First, we're going to hear from Tamsin Lejeune, the CEO of Common Objective. Then we have Yoann, Regent, Head of Sustainable Sourcing and Nature Initiatives at Kering. Then Ciara, Lead Material Developer from Patagonia. And lastly, Catherine Loader, Sustainability Specialist, Circular Economy at John Lewis and Partners. Okay, so without any further ado, let's hand over to Tamsin. Remember the rules, questions in the Q&A box, chat in the chat, and off we go. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. And what a great pleasure it is to be here. So I'm going to share my screen to show you a little bit about what we do and to give you a little introduction to the context to circular fashion, the challenges, and some of the opportunities and best practice by brands in the space. So you're looking at my dashboard on Common Objective. My name's Tamsin Lejeune. I founded the Ethical Fashion Forum way back in 2006. And before there was really much going on in sustainability and fashion. And we built a network with a common objective, that is business that works better for everyone and the planet. And in 2016, we raised funds to build Common Objective, which is effectively a tech platform to support anyone operating in fashion or interested in doing so to operate in the most sustainable and ethical way. So you're looking at my dashboard here. I'm going to take you to some of our circularity content and an introduction. Circularity is a big deal in the fashion industry at the moment. It's a buzzword, and we'll learn more about that in a sec. But first of all, how does Co work? So anybody can join Co. We're effectively a community, a bit like LinkedIn. You can join up for free if you're not already a member. You can join up in about 5 minutes. And we've got 2 algorithms that sit behind the platform. So the first is a matching algorithm. So here I'm seeing my dashboard, and you can see I've tagged our content for today around circular fashion here. But I can specify at any point what it is that I'm interested in seeing on my dashboard. So if you're operating in fashion, you can change what you're seeing here. You can access content, you can access suppliers, you can access resources. I'm also matched on this dashboard with individuals and with businesses. The more sustainable the business, the higher its search ranking. So the opportunity with that is that if you're looking for sustainable suppliers, it's pretty easy for you to find the most sustainable one first. So I'm now going to go in and tell you a little bit about what we're doing around circular fashion. So that you can find this, we do quite a lot of events, and we know that engagement on the day is only part of the picture. So if any of you want to find this content, you can do so really simply. You can see the URL here, and I'll put it in the chat also. Join Co, you can access this article, and the slides I'm going to show you here are right here. So what is circular fashion? A circular fashion economy. So a circular fashion industry is one is described as one in which waste and pollution are designed out. Products and materials are kept in use for as long as possible, including through reusing and recycling, and where natural systems are regenerated. So it's gained a lot of traction within the industry, and so too has confusion about what it is. And there's a bit of a danger there that it's become a buzzword, the next cool thing for a fashion label to say that they're doing. And increasingly, we're seeing things that are upcycled or made from recycled materials or even just recyclable, messaged as circular fashion. But circularity is not just about material recovery or about resale or rental or designing for longevity. It's all of those and bringing them together. So this diagram gives you a little introduction of start to finish. How do you create a circular economy in every step in the supply chain? So why does it matter? Why do we need a circular fashion economy? Just some of the big stats relevant to this. So 200 billion pounds of waste produced annually. Of that, 134.5 million tons of synthetic fibers are expected by 2025, and 85% of textile goes to landfill. So it's a huge issue. 95% could be recycled, huge potential. So why does it matter? Well, with over 2 billion tons of waste in 2006, the way we're growing that says 3.4 billion tons by 2050. And if we look at the market for fashion fibers, things are getting incrementally worse. So you can see that 62% of fashion textiles used in fashion are already synthetic, mainly polyester. And why is that an issue? Well, polyester has a huge carbon and biodiversity impact. It's also very cheap, very versatile, and easy to produce. But it fuels 185 coal-fired power plants. Microplastics, a major issue with synthetic fibers. And the fashion industry is one of the biggest polluters when it comes to synthetic microfibers in our oceans. 92% of microfibers in the Arctic is thought to come from fashion. And 84% of all water everywhere is now polluted by synthetic fibers. We're eating and drinking plastic. And this is exponentially increasing. So the curve for the increase of polyester is going up rapidly. Things are getting more challenging, not less so. Issues with pesticides and endangered forests as well on the positive side. So there are huge challenges, but we at Common Objective and at UNGC are in the business of looking for solutions. How can we support businesses to operate in a more sustainable way and to integrate best practice? There are huge benefits of recycled fabrics, often toxic, trash textiles. Diverting them into a recycling program could have the environmental equivalent of 7.3 million cars off the road. And when it comes to using textiles like regenerative cotton, recycled cotton, or climate beneficial wool, there are serious energy savings associated with each of them. So there is opportunity. So what's happening around the circular economy? How do we move from where we are now to where we need to be? So today's economies are primarily based on a linear model, and resources are extracted from the planet, turned into products, and then thrown away. There may be some reuse, some recycling, but ultimately it's take, make, waste. And in contrast to this, a more sustainable approach, keeping resources in circulation for as long as possible through products that are reused and can be easily recycled. And Ellen MacArthur Foundation refers to this as decoupling economic activity from consumption of finite resources and designing waste out of the system. So what are the three principles that every fashion business or business interested in circularity can do? First of all, designing out waste and pollution. According to Ellen MacArthur Foundation, about 35% of materials end up as a waste during the design and manufacturing stage. That's before a garment or product reaches the consumer. So applying circular design principles, choosing recycled and recyclable materials, keeping products and materials in use. So extending the life of clothes by just 9 extra months could reduce carbon, water, and waste footprints by around 20 to 30%. And then regenerate systems, regenerate natural systems. So moving away from polyester, prioritizing fibers that grow with regenerative fiber. And in 2006, a study estimated that about 60% of fashion's materials currently come from finite resources. So this could make a huge difference. And there is growing brand engagement. So things are happening. There is optimism. 90 fashion brands have joined Global Fashion Agenda's circular fashion system commitment. Over 50% of retail executives consider that re-commerce will be part of the business. And we've seen a massive growth in resale. Legislative environment is changing. There are laws coming in, particularly in the EU, which will make this a requirement. And the consumer purchasing behavior is changing, particularly with millennials, where we see 62% of Gen Z, according to the Global Data Consumer Resale Survey, checking secondhand first, and 46% consider the resale value before buying. So they're planning to sell, they're planning to resale. So I'm going to go on in my last few minutes to give you some examples of businesses and what they're doing. Because what is this all about, if not how to integrate best practice? So here's an example of from Yoann. They partnered with Parley for the Ocean to work with ocean plastic. And they have recycled it, created a beach capsule collection, launched last spring, recovered, blending the plastic with cotton, silk, and even cashmere. And they're now working on the 3rd collection, and working on a larger collection. They've developed 15 fabrics and a small library of fabrics. So things are happening. And here you can see some of the other products. And just if you want to know more about this, you can find there are over 600 resources on Co. A lot of them are free and available to use. You can find these to get answers. Another example, circular accessories made from next generation plastic-free plant-based leather. So a lot of these case studies are about partnerships. This is how Lejeune factory partnered with natural fiber welding and then Camper to create products that are really impressive and inspiring. And one of the great things, it's in our name, common objective, there are great opportunities to achieve change through collaboration, competitive collaboration, which allows businesses to achieve their objectives while creating products that work. These are made from mirum plant fiber. So brands use mirum, and mirum is now working with Camper, Stella McCartney, Pangai, and Allbirds. So worth checking out. And again, there's some more resources that you can have a look at. Social impact, we often don't hear about the social impact around circularity. Moving to a highly technical model often leaves out people in the equation. This is an example from Vivienne Westwood. They're upcycling products with slum dwellers in Kenya. Really impressive. They've been working on this project for 12 years, so it is possible. Resale, the opportunity with the resale. Finisterre has produced an amazing resale solution offering take-back, re-commerce, and end-of-life recycling through partnership with an organization called Reskin. And again, more resources here. Toast is doing some really interesting things around mending. So what they've done is they have created Toast Repair, which is a free mending service for worn garments offered in all Toast shops. And they offer visible as well as invisible options. So pretty exciting. And I'm not going to go through these because I'm coming to the end of my time. But as I mentioned, this can be found on Co I'll put a link in the chat so you can find all of these linked to solution providers on Co that you can connect with and message and find out more. So finally, just to finish with, don't focus on the negativity, just get involved with the solution, whatever that looks like. Sometimes it can seem overwhelming. There's so many challenges to address, but there are ways to address them also. And finish off with a link to the Co's Circular Fashion Hub, which you can visit here on Co, where there's tons of information from training to tools to resources to help you to become more circular. Thank you.
Thanks, Tamsin. That's great. I think that's such an important message that we have all the way through this, is that solutions already exist and we need to get on with it. Not to say that all the solutions are there, but we can't succumb to despair, that there are lots of really positive stories out there, and lots of companies already showing that they can work. We've already had a couple of links, I think, to go through the chat, but there's so much going on there that definitely a good idea to post them again. But now we're going to hear from Yoann. Over to you.
Thank you, Steve. So happy to present how at Kering we are working on regenerative agriculture. And if you would please move to the next slide, I would actually thank Tamsin so much for actually speaking how regenerative agriculture and circularity are connected. Because as Tamsin said, a lot of people sometimes don't really see the clear link between the topic of circularity and nature. Only maybe limiting the definition of circularity around use of recycled material, end of use solutions are designed for circularity. And even when they think about design for circularity, they might not even really place the topic of regenerative agriculture within this definition. But it's really important to remember that by moving from this take, make, waste linear economy to a circular economy, we're actually supporting natural processes and leaving more room for nature to thrive. And by doing this shift, we also shift from a very extractive way of using raw materials to regeneration. So we don't degrade nature anymore, but we really build natural capital. We use farming practices that allow nature to rebuild soil, to increase biodiversity, to return biological materials to earth. And this is the beginning and the standpoint of circularity. So if we move really to a truly regenerative model, we will emulate natural system. And this sentence, which I love, which is that there is no waste in nature. You know, when a leaf falls from a tree, it feeds the forest. And for billions of years, natural systems have regenerated themselves. So we need to really try to mimic what nature is doing, and hence the strong connection between these two topics and the interconnection. And then moving on to Kering, it's very relevant, of course, for Kering to integrate regenerative agriculture in our vision around circularity, because most of the raw materials that make up the beautiful products from our maison are plant or animal based. So if we would just say, oh, you know, in Kering, we don't do that much synthetic, so I don't need to care about circularity, it would show that we don't understand the true vision of what circularity is. So if you can move to the next slide, please. Yeah, so then what is regenerative agriculture? So that's a very, very big question, and there are many, many definitions, but the starting point is really a system of practices that goes beyond simply sustainable agriculture. And it's really a set of practices that take advantage of natural tendencies of ecosystems to regenerate when disturbed. It's also a framework that is much more focused on the outcomes, actually, so making sure that you have positive outcomes on nature, rather than that dictating specific practices, recognizing that in order to have positive outcomes, everything is so context specific that one practice in one place might not work in another place. That being said, at Kering, we have decided to articulate our definition of regenerative agriculture around 5 key pillars, which we believe will support the general natural positive outcomes that regenerative agriculture is pursuing. The first one being to increase the capacity of soils to sequester carbon, hold water, and also improve other elements of soil functionality. The second one being around the protection and the restoration of biodiversity, speaking about plants and animal species, but also the whole landscapes in which the raw materials might be produced. The elimination of the use of synthetic and agrochemical inputs, which I do agree this is more a practice, but we do believe that it's a practice that is necessary to reach the positive outcomes within the 4 other pillars. Very important, supporting the livelihood of farmers, because all of these practices have human and people at heart. And then for these materials we are talking about that involves animals, we need to enhance the animal welfare of these farmed livestock if we really truly want to have a 360 approach. Next slide, please. So recognizing that and recognizing that the future of the fashion industry is inextricably linked with the future of agriculture, we together with, so Kering together with Conservation International, launched in 2021 what we call the Regenerative Fund for Nature, which is aiming at transforming 1 million hectares of crop and rangeland into regenerative agricultural space by 2025. Indeed, we know that this practice have been proven to deliver outcomes we need for climate, nature, and livelihoods. That being said, much more support is needed to the farmers in order to drive this transition. And so this is the first really goal of this fund, is really to finance the transition through grants. So these are not even loans, these are grants that are given to farmers within the supply chain of wool, cotton, cashmere, and leather, in order for them to adapt regenerative practices and measure regenerative outcomes. The second objective of the fund is really to ground regenerative agriculture in science, because we don't want this word to become a new greenwashing word, a buzzword. We wanted to show that these outcomes are measurable, scientifically measurable in times, and show positive trends across the 5 pillars that I've described previously. And finally, but really importantly, is really a topic on which we believe that we cannot act alone. So it's really, we created the fund as an open source solution for all other brands to join, because we do believe that pre-competitive collaboration is needed. That being said, not only in the fashion industry actually, but also across industries, because we share production landscapes and supply chain with other industries, might be cosmetics, might be food and bev, and it's only by really working all together that we will have a truly positive impact. And I'm actually quite happy to mention that a couple of weeks, a month ago, Inditex, which is a very different profile than Kering within the fashion industry, has actually pledged to join the fund and adding resource, which means that we will be able to support even more farmers into this transition and generate an even more positive outcomes. And we will have others joining us later this year as well to scale up the fund. And finally, moving on to the next slide, I wanted to show concretely what it means, because okay, it's really nice to speak about this, but how do you actually support the transition? How do you support the farmers? And how do you see the positive change? So I wanted to take a moment to zoom in on this project. One of the 7 projects that is supported by the fund in this first 7 project that was selected is run by Conservation International in South Africa. And it's focusing on small holders of sheep producing wool. And so I was very lucky to be there on the ground a couple of months ago and to really see the impact on the ground of this. So it's a project that is targeting over 10,000 hectares, engaging around 400 smallholders. And on this, I will just take one moment to focus on 2 of the outcomes where we really could see the impact on the land. So if you take the first one, which is around soil and water, this project is really monitoring different things, one being the quantity of carbon sequestered per hectares, and another one being the water infiltration and the capacity of the soil to really to collect the water. And this is what is illustrated on the pictures on the left. Actually, water has been a very, very problematic issue in this region, in these landscapes, because the soils being much poorer because of overgrazing, we're not able to hold the water, which has created this huge ravine, huge erosion problem. But then by using actual nature-based solutions adapted to the local landscapes, they are already able to reverse these changes by resting the land and then by using traditional methods of regenerating the lands. And it's quite striking to see that in a period of a year, some of the severe erosion was starting to be actually turned around. Moving on to another pillar where we also could see very concretely the outcomes were about animal welfare. Because of course, when you need to care for animals, you need to be properly trained, but it's very difficult for these smallholders in very remote areas with not that many resources to actually do that. So it was quite interesting to see that specific animal welfare trainings had been performed, access to vaccines had been funded thanks to the Regenerative Fund for Nature. And something which was quite interesting as well was that they implemented, thanks to this grant, mobile sharing shed, which means that instead of having to move the animals, sometimes for very long distance, in able to be shorn to get the wool, we actually took the opposite approach, is that the shearing stations are moving in these communal spaces, which are really close to where the sheep are herded, so that then they wouldn't need to have transport, they wouldn't need to have stress linked to the transport. So I know that I'm at the top of my time and I've been speaking really fast, but it's a topic on which I'm passionate, so I'm really happy to answer questions you might have on this specific topic. Thank you very much, and Steve, back to you.
Thanks very much, Yoann. Really great. I think it's such an important point that you raise here, that we have to have system change, and it's not enough to just be using natural fibers if it's still in a linear model. We need to think about the whole system, and regenerative agriculture is an absolutely essential part of that. So really appreciate the work you're doing there, and thanks for sharing. Now we're going to move on and hear from Ciara from Patagonia. Ciara, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to share with you some of our wins and fails in the adventure that is circularity right now in the fashion industry. Go ahead and hop to the next slide. So Patagonia, we're pretty public that we're in business to save our home planet, which is a pretty lofty goal. So we're always continually pushing in ourselves internally and want to be pushed by external parties on what does that mean in apparel and how can we really do our part in the space. And on the next slide. So for circularity specifically, we really have 3 grounding principles, and we call them the R's. So we want everything to be repairable and made of the highest quality materials. Everything we put out there, we want it to last as long as possible, because as wonderful speakers ahead of me have already mentioned, just buying and consuming less and using things longer really does make a huge impact. And to promote that, not only does Patagonia want to repair any garments that we've made, but also really promote reuse through our WornWear platform, where people are welcome to come, and if they're no longer using something, they can bring it back and you get a credit for another product that might be more suitable for what their needs are. But we do want to continually educate and promote resale platforms. And then the final R that I'm going to lean into a little bit more here is on recycling. And Patagonia has a commitment of no incineration and no landfill, which means internally we have a lot we got to figure out and find solutions for, because Patagonia makes a lot of very technical apparel, whether it's a jacket or luggage. It's very complex pieces. So how can we really start building product for a circular model? And next slide. So one of the first steps that we really took when we were trying to dig a little deeper into circularity is really mapping out, this is a very simplistic diagram, but it's pretty similar across any brand, of what a circular model should be looking like. And really what we kind of came down to was, not only does Patagonia need to be a buyer of recycled materials, specifically around synthetics, we also need to start looking at our product of how can our products become future feedstocks for recyclers. So we are doing our part in keeping this circle moving. And on the next slide. So we're really trying to focus right now on what are the things that we can control the best. Because frankly, once it leaves our stores or a retail partner and is in the hands of the customer, it becomes really challenging. We can lead, we can try and educate on best practices, but really trying to focus on the things that we can control is probably where we're going to get the most momentum. So one of the pinnacle items that we are really leaning into is design. How are we designing for circularity? Because at almost every single one of these little bubbles moving around, there's going to be waste. And so much waste can be mitigated if you get the right design from the beginning. From everything from pattern making, how do you optimize patterns, even if it's a surface design, if you need to line up a huge plaid on a shirt and make sure it all matches, you're probably going to have a lot of cutting waste. So how do we minimize any of our cutting waste that is really dictated by design? And then, of course, these material selections, making sure materials are compatible for circularity. So keeping polyester with polyester, or not having those poly, nylon, spandex, like these triple, quadruple combinations that just become a real nightmare for recycling partners when this product does reach its end of life eventually. And then partnering also with our supply chain, looking at our mills, our spinners, our cut and sew partners. How can we help promote collection of cut scrap at the factory level and get it back to recyclers? Because it's also a very low-hanging fruit for cutting waste. Since it's pre-consumer, it's a lot cleaner. The content is a lot more known, and if you can just keep it at a factory, sort it properly, it's going to be that much easier for a recycler to take it back. And we are definitely still promoting the repair, the collection, and the recycling, because there's so much education and infrastructure that we need to continually promote. And currently right now, Patagonia, when we receive garments back from customers, we're almost acting as our own sortation and collection and detrimming partners, where we're getting the garments back and we're trying to work with recyclers to sort, detrim, and present any of these garments to recyclers as best as we can with what is available today. And next slide. So I have this little image. This is a great one we try and do with design, and anytime we're doing internal education for new teammates of how complicated a lot of our garments can be. And this is actually one of our more simplistic garments that we make, where there's just a lot of components. And so for the materials, like I mentioned, we're really not only trying to be that buyer of recycled materials, but then also make sure everything is compatible so this garment can become feedstock to a recycler eventually down the road. So where there's a placket, try not to have a cotton placket with a nylon main body, or then on top of that, a polyester spandex elastic cuff. And as much as possible, use trims that are easily repairable and not things that really deliberately damage the material. So if you were to need to replace that component, there's a permanent hole in the garment. And on the next one. And as I mentioned, looking at our pre-consumer waste, and that's a partnership between our design, our product developers, and also our cut and sew factories of how do we really optimize patterns, surface design to lower the waste volume from our products. And at the final one. So leaning into that repairability, as well as I mentioned with the trims, and just making sure that this garment is not only viewed through a lens of, is it hitting price points, is it hitting the aesthetic we're looking for, but really, is this garment going to become a future feedstock and have a long and lengthy life between its birth and then what we call the death of the garment. And next one. And pretty much we have a long way to go, and there we're always learning, talking to new recyclers. Just when we think we've talked to every recycler there is on the planet, we hear from someone else that someone's investigating or researching, and how can we partner and support. So we are always looking to make new friends in the industry. So feel free to reach out at any time. And part of that making friends is sharing our learnings of what is working, what is not working. How do we educate customers? How do we promote recycling infrastructure? Because Patagonia cannot go on this journey all by ourselves. It's going to take a huge lift globally to really stop this more linear cycle of fashion that has just become what the industry is today. We're also looking at supporting what our recyclers are sharing with us about more specifics on a garment label, because right now most countries for garment labeling, it's these broader buckets of polyester, but it was PET, PTT, PLA, like so often these different molecular differences are not distinguished on a garment label, but those are huge differences for a recycler depending on their method of recycling. So we're also just being patient and doing our very best to support, but we do know that there is a lot of items that we make today that have a very long way to go before there is a recycling opportunity for those pieces, like I mentioned, that are like luggage, where there's metals and rubbers and coatings and zippers and different very complex components, where it will be very difficult to get a piece of luggage to be torn apart, broken down into its raw materials, and then ultimately recycled and have a circular piece of luggage. We see that as a very long horizon, but we're going to continue to strive for that. And in the meantime, make luggage to be as durable and as repairable as possible. So we're hopefully not seeing a lot of end of life from luggage in the short term. And that's just one example of many that I could share. But that's what I wanted to share with you all today. And on the next slide, just happy to take any questions, or we might be waiting till the end.
Yeah, thanks, Ciara. I think we will wait till the end, but certainly you've given us lots of great food for thought, and I encourage everyone to keep posting your questions into the Q&A box. Thanks to everyone who has already done so. Let me just give a little bit of a nudge, though, on the voting. We've got more than 240 people on this call, but our most voted for question has only got 3 votes. Now, we could interpret that as nobody likes any of the questions, but rather I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that not enough people are going in there and giving the thumbs up to the questions they want to answer. So please do just take a minute and scan through the questions and help us prioritize which ones we're going to focus on when we get to the Q&A after we've heard from Catherine from John Lewis Partners. Catherine, over to you.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks very much for the invite to speak today. So hi, everyone. Thanks very much for joining the webinar. My name is Catherine Loader. I am a sustainability specialist at John Lewis, focusing on circular economy. If we can go to the next slide, please. So for anyone who doesn't know the John Lewis Partnership, I thought I'd just give you a little bit of an overview to some of our history, because it gives a little bit of the context of where we are today and what we're focusing on in the sustainability space. So the John Lewis Partnership is a UK-based retailer, and we're made up of 2 of the UK's most well-known and well-loved brands, which is John Lewis and Waitrose. So John Lewis is a department store, and we sell products across fashion, home, and tech. And Waitrose is a supermarket chain selling high quality groceries and produce. The partnership, as it is today, was founded over 100 years ago by our founder, John Speeden Lewis. And the company actually started as a bit of an experiment into a better way of doing business. And the way it did that is by including staff in all of the decision-making of the business. John Speeden Lewis really wanted the company to be employee-owned and to kind of make sure that employees can contribute to the way that the business was run. And that operating model still exists today. So all of the partners in the John Lewis Partnership are known as partners, and we are owners and trustees of the business. So in 1937, the partnership brought Waitrose to bring the two brands together under the same umbrella. And a little bit about how it operates today. So we have 34 John Lewis shops and about 330 Waitrose shops across the UK, along with our online stores. We also have 2 international sourcing offices. We have our own soft furnishings factory, which makes a lot of our filled bedding and curtain products. We have various distribution centres. We have 3 Waitrose and Partners cookery schools. So if you're interested in learning some new cooking skills, definitely recommend those. And we also have our own Waitrose and Partners farm based in Leckford. And from the very beginning of when the company was founded, it really has valued nature and the environment and really found ways to give back to the environment around us. So I'll give a little bit more information about our current sustainability strategy and how we're continuing to try to give back to the environment. So next slide, please. So yeah, I just really wanted to mention that firstly, our ethics and sustainability team spans across both of the brands. So we work across both Waitrose and John Lewis, which gives us some really interesting opportunities and challenges. And I wanted to mention that obviously circularity is a key pillar, part of this strategy, but we also work alongside many other great teams within E&S to make sure, like I said, we're giving back to the environment and focusing on nature. So a little bit more information about these other pillars. So firstly, people and supply chains. So we're working really closely with our suppliers and partners to make sure that we're protecting the rights of our workers in our supply chains and really championing worker voice. So we've got several really great initiatives to kind of empower the workers in our supply chains and kind of give them that voice. We have a great team that work across kind of raw materials and sourcing. So they focus on agriculture, aquaculture, fisheries, and our raw materials across both food and non-food. So quite a challenge for that team, but basically they work really closely with our producers and our suppliers, making sure that we're moving our materials to more sustainable alternatives and really supporting our suppliers right from kind of farm to product and focusing on nature as well. And then circularity and waste, obviously why we're all here today. So we work across circular business models and circular design, and we also work really closely with the packaging team here at John Lewis to think about how we can both reduce the amount of packaging that we're using, but also, again, switching to better alternatives. And we also focus a lot on legislation, and I've seen a few questions already about kind of legislation coming through. So that's something that we are definitely focusing on. And then I also just wanted to mention that we have a biodiversity and climate action team. So again, they're looking at how we can minimise our emissions as a whole partnership. So again, across both Waitrose and John Lewis, and focusing on how we can reduce the amount of nature loss, both in our operations and our supply chains. And then finally, on the sort of social impact and health pillar, so social impact, we do a lot of work with the charity sector and kind of giving back to the communities around us. And then finally, with health, nutrition and well-being, we're sort of trying to empower our customers to lead a healthy and happy life. So I just wanted to mention that because obviously circularity is kind of part of a much bigger strategy here at the partnership. And like I said, we're working really closely with other teams within E&S to kind of bring some of our goals and targets to life. So next slide, please. So obviously focusing on circular economy in particular. So a few of the other speakers have kind of mentioned this or shown similar diagrams, but this is obviously what we're trying to work towards. So this just shows kind of the boxes in blue is obviously a linear economy, and what we're currently kind of working to with that sort of make, use and dispose kind of economy. And we want to move more towards that circular economy. So at the partnership, we're trying to do that in several different ways. So the boxes in pink kind of show some of the initiatives that we're trying to push forward. So we've got a big push towards take back, and I'll talk a little bit more detail about some of our existing initiatives on that a little bit later on. We're also exploring rental. So again, we've got a couple of initiatives that are already up and running and looking how we can expand that offering. We're also looking into repair So trying to follow some of the amazing work that Patagonia are doing in the repair space, and looking at how we can encourage our customers to make sure that they're keeping their products for as long as possible, but then thinking about how they can care for and repair their products as well. And then some of the other kind of things that we've called out here is about reimagining. So thinking about how we could potentially upcycle materials into new products, or how we could transform one product into another. And then looking at things like pre-loved as well. And a kind of key underpinning to all of this is circular design. So that's a lot of the work that I'm focusing on, essentially working really closely with our commercial teams to think about how we can redesign our products with circularity in mind. So following some of the principles that Tamsin mentioned from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, how we can kind of incorporate those into our products as well. So next slide, please. So these are some of our existing circularity initiatives. So like I said, we're trying to kind of tap into a lot of those different aspects of the circular economy. So firstly, we've got quite a few existing recycling initiatives. So encouraging our customers to bring products back to John Lewis instead of just throwing them away. And we do this, we've got several kind of different offerings for take back. So we've got Textile. So this is where customers can bring in small electrical items to a John Lewis store, and we make sure that they're recycled in the right way. We started this in 2022, and we've also just rolled out a kind of a delivery service. So when a customer orders a larger electrical item at their home, they can also give back small electrical items back to our delivery drivers. And again, making sure that we're sending them down the right routes and they're recycled properly. We also have Fashion Cycle. This again was launched in about May last year, I believe. This has been really successful with customers, again, encouraging them to bring back fashion items into John Lewis stores. We work with the service provider Sackle, and they ensure that, again, that the fashion items are processed properly. Anything that is can be resold is then resold, and then other items, if they're damaged or cannot be repaired, they then go down a recycling route. And then finally, we've got Beauty Cycle. So again, works in a very similar way to Fashion Cycle. Customers can bring back their empty beauty products, so empty shampoo bottles or whatever it might be. Customers can bring back to a John Lewis store, and they'll get a voucher which they can then spend on new items. And then I wanted to call out some of our home services. So we've got sofa reuse. So when a customer orders a new sofa from us, we offer the service that we can take their old sofa away free of charge and make sure that, again, it's going down the proper kind of recycling routes. And again, any sofa that can be reused or resold as is, that's always the route that we want to take. We've got a similar offering with mattresses as well. So again, a very similar setup. So when a customer orders a new mattress from us, we then offer to take back their old mattress as well. And you'll see there a bit of a target around take back. So we've got a target that by 2025, we'll have a take back or buyback solution for every product category, which, like I said earlier, can be a bit of a challenge considering the number of different products that we sell at John Lewis. And then I just wanted to call out some of the rental opportunities and initiatives that we've currently offering. So we offer children's wear rental with the Little Loop. So this is where a customer has a certain number of credits that they can spend to rent some children's wear items, and then when the children grow out of those clothes, they no longer need them, they can send them back. And we're doing that in partnership with the Little Loop, who kind of process the clothes, clean them, and then get them ready for the next customer. So a great opportunity for any new parents. Instead of buying new items, you can just rent them instead. And a very similar opportunity with fashion. So last year we launched fashion rental for occasion wear, and we've just launched it for maternity wear as well. So again, that's where customers can, if you've got an event coming up, instead of buying new, you can just rent something instead. And then finally, circular design. So we've got, I wanted to call out the Sheet to Sleep mattress. So this was quite an innovative product that we launched last year. I mentioned earlier that we're in quite a unique position, having access to both the Waitrose and John Lewis supply chains. And this was a great example of us kind of being able to combine those two supply chains together. And we sourced wool from within in the UK from our Waitrose farmers and used it to fill mattresses to be sold at John Lewis. So it was a great way of kind of making sure that material was kept within our existing supply chain, and also preventing any of that wool material going to waste as well. And then finally, I just wanted to call out our circular design target. So like I said, we're now working really closely with our commercial teams to kind of redesign our products with circularity in mind. And we've got a target to achieve that for 100% of our new own brand products by 2028. Next slide, please. And then finally, I just wanted to call out the Circular Future Fund. So last year, we launched our own kind of John Lewis fund, and it was to encourage innovation in the circularity space. So we had about 245 applicants apply across different sectors. So we had food waste, textiles and household products and services. And this was, like I said, a kind of way of attracting kind of small businesses and entrepreneurs to put forward some really interesting projects that we could then help to support. So we had 4 amazing winners. So we had Dame, who are the producers of sustainable period products. We have Pip and Henry, who are looking at into expandable children's shoes. We have the SLIC, so they're looking at how to put kind of repair cafes into libraries within Scotland. And we have the University of Leeds, who are doing some really interesting work looking at how to remove dyes and prints from existing products. So that was another way that we're just really trying to encourage the move towards circular economy within the industry, and something that we're continually looking at and trying to support as well. So I just wanted to mention that as well. And I think if you go to the next slide, I think that's everything. So thank you very much. And yeah, looking forward to the questions.
Thank you, Catherine. And we do have a lot of questions. So thanks very much, everybody, for being so active and putting your questions into the Q&A. Yeah, do please, panelists, yeah, turn on your cameras and let's get stuck in to these. Thanks to everyone that's voted up the questions. Keep doing that, because to be quite honest, I don't think we're going to get through them all. And so your support in helping us again to prioritize is going to be most welcome. Well done, Shijo. You seem to have your finger on the pulse with the top 2 questions coming from you. But they are great questions, and I'm really interested in hearing some answers. So the first one, fashion retail, e-commerce has the highest rate of returns. A lot of the returned merchandise are not fit to be sold again and are destroyed. How are brands and retailers working on reducing returns from a circularity perspective? I think that's interesting on a couple of levels, isn't it? Clearly there's a possibly even overwhelming commercial imperative to reduce returns. Does that make the circularity aspect to some extent irrelevant? But then it's clearly really important what you do with those returns once they are in your hands. So I suspect that all of Yoann, Catherine, and Ciara have a direct interest in this question, and Tamsin, you may have an indirect one. Does anybody want to start with telling us what you're doing with returns?
I can start. I mean, recognizing that that's what makes it interesting. I think John Lewis, Patagonia, and Kering were 3 very different business segments within fashion. So first of all, fashion is a very large spectrum of companies and activities. But I think I wanted to highlight the point that you're making, that this question and a lot of things around circularity and even sustainability as a whole in the corporate is actually quite linked to business models, and economic models have nothing to do with sustainability. It's more how to be more efficient. And even if you don't want to do it for circularity or sustainability reasons, you should do it anyway because it makes business sense. And this topic of returns is also one of these. I mean, you don't want to have high rates of returns just for business perspective as well, because you're losing money having returns. So I think it's important to also place that in the context that it's not, for me, sustainability team's role to tackle this, but we are definitely the one advocating internally of changing and challenging these business models. On the specific question of returns, I have to say we we have a quite different profile. As I was saying, in luxury, we don't have actually that high rates of returns, but we are still working on ensuring that the best quality of the products is delivered, and then also giving a lot, as you can guess, of aftercare solutions to consumers. For instance, one of our brands, Bottega Veneta, just launched what they call a craft certificate, which means that actually if you buy one of their bags, you actually have like a lifetime warranty. If it gets damaged, if it gets, so you will get the same bag returned to you, but it will get fixed, it will get mended over the life of these products, acknowledging that, of course, being high luxury products, these typically have a very long life. And it's also in order to foster this vision of circularity. But I'm conscious that, of course, it is quite niche solution that it's adapted to our products, but be keen to hear Ciara or Catherine's vision on that.
Thanks, Yoann. Maybe Ciara, can I come to you, because you made a specific point about nothing goes to incineration, and but how do you deal with returns? Do they all get returned back for resale? Do you have some issues of sometimes they are destroyed, or have you cracked that?
I think every brand is going to have at least some level of either damaged product, either at the store, or maybe a lot of garments came in from the manufacturer that wound up being defective and wasn't caught before it got shipped. There's always going to be this level of like new, but for whatever reason, it can't be resold. So our first go-to is always going to be, if it's dirty, can we just like wash it and donate it, or put it on a resale with our wornwear site? Can it be repaired? If it is something that is genuinely, this is not of quality, we really, this is not suitable for donation, repair, or resale, then we will usually put that into our recycling. And oftentimes, depending on what it is, but if it's pre-consumer, those tend to be a lot cleaner feedstocks. So that will oftentimes go almost like into our R&D recycling bucket, where if someone, either a company or a school, they're looking at a recrafting project or a recycling project, and they want to, or even just like learning, we've sent garments out where they tear them apart and they weigh them, so we can have better data on what the components mean by weight when it comes to circularity. Also, we're just looking, like Yoann mentioned, at the root cause. Like, how did this happen? How are we preventing it? Because it makes business sense, as well as keeps our resources out there usable in the world, instead of just downgrading resources into this point where it has to be recycled. Thanks.
Catherine, I imagine this is a huge issue for you guys, just because of the crazy range of products that the company offers. How do you manage the waste and keep your circularity principles going with returns?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and obviously it depends quite a lot on the type of return, because obviously there are different reasons that customer are returning items. So obviously if a customer is ordering multiple sizes of the same dress, for example, but then they are returning one of the sizes, that is a very different approach to if something is being returned because it's damaged. So we have different returns routes depending on the reason for the return, and we're doing quite a lot of work to try and reduce that first instance of customers ordering multiple sizes of the same item. So we're trying to improve our messaging on our website, and also trying to just improve the whole sizing process, to again just try and reduce the sheer volume of items that are being ordered and returned. But then on what we would call a kind of regretted return, so on an item where a product might be damaged, that will obviously be assessed. So again, there might be different reasons for that. So if it's a quality issue, we're doing a lot of work internally to make sure that our products are the highest quality that they can be, and constantly looking at things like durability testing to make sure our products last as long as possible. But if there is any kind of damage on an item, that would go through our kind of normal returns process. A product would be assessed, I guess, in a similar way to what Ciara was saying at Patagonia. So it would be assessed if it can be just cleaned or if it needs to be repaired. And if it's kind of beyond repair and there's nothing that we can do about it, then it's sent on to kind of secondary markets. And again, making sure that we're recycling it in the correct way. But yeah, it's very dependent on both the type of product it is and also the type of return it is as well.
All right, thanks all. Let's go on to the next question from Sijo, which I think is also quite interesting. Further down the value chain, I suppose, how do brands build the internal buy-in and consensus on investing in post-consumer circularity? Collection, repair, transfer to recycling. He feels this is a big internal cultural and mindset shift, and I suppose I have to agree. We spoke in that earlier question about the strong commercial imperative around returns, and that's really obvious. The commercial imperative to making your products last longer, or be recycled, or have a second life in a second-hand shop is less obvious. You're now starting to rely on consumers wanting to do the right thing, it feels like, rather than necessarily a more straight-up transactional value consideration. Now, maybe I don't want to. Well, Ciara, I know Patagonia quite famously had a "Don't Buy This Jacket" campaign, so I know you've got some experience in this space. Is it just, yeah? Anyway, I'll let you talk. What do you?
Yeah.
What do you think of this?
No worries. I feel bad because I probably have it the easiest. Our board and leadership is very dedicated to sustainability, and that's why the company exists. So things like buy-in and trying to make that business case. It is still a business. It's not a philanthropic endeavor, so we have to do our part to create how this can really work. How can we be the most efficient and use the resources that we have available? Patagonia, though, we just celebrated our 50-year anniversary, so the board definitely has the vision of what are we doing to tee up for the next 50, and really part of that vision is really building for these more circular economies, almost even just for resource protection down the line. Because right now, recycled polyester has been predominantly coming from the bottling industry, but now the bottling industry is being challenged to be responsible for taking back their own bottles, which is good. That, it's not necessarily, I don't believe the apparel industry's responsibility to clean up the bottling industry. So it's good they're cleaning up their own industry, but then that may in the future really create price issues, accessibility to feedstocks that are recycled. So looking into a circularity model, it's really also being proactive and making sure there are resources in the future that we can use.
Well, that's a great point. That's a longer term strategic take on it. Catherine, an interesting business model at John Lewis, since you're all the employers are the owners, but maybe still a little more challenging to get the buy-in for this agenda, although it seems like you have done.
Yeah, so I think one thing that I'll call out here is kind of governance, which is not a super exciting word, but we are, at John Lewis, we have a kind of ethics and sustainability committee, which kind of reports directly into our chairwoman, Sharon White. So we are held to account for all of those kind of targets and commitments that we've put out publicly. We have to go back to our chairwoman and kind of report on progress with that. And Sharon is really supportive of those commitments. I think looking more broadly at the business, a lot of what we're doing in the sustainability team is working with our teams on kind of training, because I think for a lot of people, this is still the concept of circularity or circular design is still very new. And for a lot of our internal stakeholders, designers, buyers, quality and technical teams, this is a complete shift in the way that they design and develop products. So for us, that's been a huge part of this as well, is just making sure that we're engaging with our teams internally. I think there's another aspect to this question as well, which is also about the customer buy-in. Because again, as you know, as much as it's about our internal teams kind of changing the way that they operate, it's also about our customers kind of changing the way that they shop with us. So that's been really interesting as well. You know, with a lot of the initiatives that I mentioned in the presentation, we've started with a lot of those kind of smaller trials, kind of linking with our sort of customer loyalty team. So we know that our most loyal customers tend to be our most engaged customers as well, and the most responsive when we come to kind of launching these new initiatives. So that's been also like a key way for us to kind of test some of these new circular business models with our customers as well, before we sort of start to scale them up and across the whole of the business. So yeah, a tricky question, because I feel like there's a lot to unpack there, both within our business internally, but also with customers as well.
Thanks, Catherine. Yoann, a different perspective perhaps for you guys. You're such a high-end brand.
I like this question. I would like to take a step back. So at Kering, we are quite lucky that we are able to really clearly map where most of our environmental footprint happens, thanks to our environmental profit and loss account. And actually, it's been now 2 or 3 years that we also include in the scope of the EPNL the use phase and the end of life of products. And by integrating this phase, it was quite interesting to see that even by adding this phase, the raw material extraction is still the one that needs the most investment, because it's still the one that has the biggest impact. So this is why, going back to why regenerative agriculture has a big part to stay and why it should be integrated into design for circularity, is also stating that. So we do invest for circularity more heavily into the raw material extraction phase and really moving from extractive to regenerating. That being said, we also do invest in solutions for end of life, mostly, as I was explaining before, focusing on repair due to the type of products we're working with. We have actually our own internal centralized repair hub, which is actually paired with our logistic hub, because a big topic as well is, of course, reverse logistics. So it makes sense to embed the repair hub within the logistics hub. So it's a big investment, of course, but as I was saying, due to the type of products, not only the price of the products, but also the emotional value of the products that our customers have a connection. It can be a bag that was gifted or passed along by your mother, by your grandmother, etc., etc. And then also we do a lot of work in each individual markets that we have, because of course we don't want everything to flow back to Italy or to flow back to France. So we do have the national partnerships with very often startups or social entrepreneurs that can work on repairing. So for instance, I can name that in France, we are working with a small structure that is called Tilly, that is really specialized in repairing products. And they have a network in France, so you can have proximity solutions to either repair completely back to your products, or sometimes just customize it and upscale it. And it's really, upcycle it. And it's really the starting point of this company, which is quite interesting, is really about this emotional link to the material. It's really buying to keep a good product and a good quality product that you have had for a long time, or that was passed to you by a family member or a friend. So we are investing in solutions as well, but I think it's important to keep in mind that you should invest where your impact is, and you should basically make sure that maybe not having the most shiny solution about take back systems or stuff like that is actually where you will have impact. And this is why we are investing heavily in regenerative materials at Kering.
Thanks, Yoann. That's a really, really great point. Tamsin, I haven't picked on you yet, and I'm sure you have something to say about all of these questions. Do you want to come in on this one? Because I'm definitely going to get you to come in on the next one. So
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one. I mean, we have the advantage in this forum of having three brands which probably have quite a lot of commitment at the top to sustainability. So it's a really good question. How do you get that consensus and buy-in when you don't have that? And we do work with quite a few brands in that scenario. And I think one of the ways forward is ambassadors. So a lot of brands might start with an ambassador program, and it sort of leads into Maria's question. You know, how can you make the case for circularity for brands with lower price points? Often it's very difficult when the brand has a lower price point. It may also not have really deep commitment at board level. Where do you go from there? So we see kind of three levers. One is employees, the individuals who are working within the brands. We've seen quite junior people drive change by sheer dedication and by putting together, you know, getting together with others in the business. Every business relies on its staff. And as you saw from one of the stats from my presentation, millennials care. And if you want to get good, if you want the best to work within the company, there needs to be some commitment around sustainability. So I think there's one thing, motivated staff, motivated team, and there are stats around that. Another one is consumers. So there is evidence. There is certainly evidence around resale. Consumers want to be buying secondhand products. So how can you make the business case? You know, going back to where is the business case within this? We're going to be uploading some more content on the hub specifically on that, because it gets the crux of the matter. The real pain point is, how do you, if you're operating a fashion business based on the bottom line, achieving the bottom line, all your KPIs are around that, how do you integrate sustainability and circularity meaningfully? And finally, the final lever and the most important one is legislation. And we are seeing interesting things happening. And there's one other question on that I noticed. I think the New York Fashion Act is really exciting, and the EU regulations are relevant. And although they don't apply so well here, no fashion business can operate in an isolated way now without engaging with the EU. So there's hope there.
Thanks, Tamsin. Before we move on from Maria's question, I mean, Yoann, we probably can exclude you from this one. And you know, Patagonia generally not perceived as a distinction between value and price is important to note, but it's certainly not typically expensive or inexpensive in most markets. And frankly, Catherine, John Lewis is generally also not is viewed as slightly upmarket. Are lower, I mean, you have lower price points though in all of the offerings that your companies make. Are they just caught up in the circularity of the whole company? Do you have to make carve-outs for maybe Catherine, I could ask you this one, like in some of your specific programs around mattresses, for example, do you have some products in there that just aren't able to participate in the circularity that you're trying to embed in the same way as higher price products are? Is this something that you're working with around with lower price points?
Yeah, so a couple of things to mention here is that we're a majority branded business. So the majority of items that we sell are actually third-party brands. We do have within our own brand label, we have a more kind of entry point offering called Any Day. So that's Any Day products across both fashion and home, which are again more on that kind of value side. And I think just echoing some of the points that have already been made about, we're always looking at that balance between value and quality. So we really pride ourselves on the fact that the quality of our products is good, and you know, we're continually looking at ways that we can improve the longevity and durability of those products while still appreciating that that is more of a challenge for some of those more entry price point product ranges. I think just kind of echoing what's been said, like I think the important thing to recognize here is that circularity is about progress over perfection. And if there's even like one small change you could make to a product, or one small trial you can do on a circular business model, that's actually better than not doing anything at all. And I think that's the case even if you do have perhaps a cheaper price point. I would also just question if it is like a cheap fashion brand, for example, or, you know, a super kind of, you know, always as a customer, as much as anything, always look at what is that balance between value and quality, and make sure that you're kind of investing in the right places. That's what I'd encourage.
Yeah, I think that's really critical to the whole circularity conversation, is that it's that idea about value, and something that's slightly more expensive but lasts for much, much longer. Yes. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to chime in, if for those who may work at more of those fast fashion, more budget brands, a low-hanging fruit and some partnerships that we've seen is oftentimes you have the advantage of becoming a really good feedstock in the future, because those more budget oriented styles are much more simplistic in make, usually don't have these like more premium protein like the silks and the wools. And if you're sticking with, have a polyester product, design it to be all polyester. If you're having a cotton tee, have it, don't blend it with a nylon, or just keep it very simplistic in the material selection. That can be a very inexpensive way for you to participate in circularity through just education with your design and PD team. And that way, even though you're maybe pumping out much more volume and the quality may not be there, at least what you are creating can be readily, easily acceptable feedstock to recyclers.
Thanks, Ciara. That's a really, really great tip. So much appreciated. Okay, time is running down, but maybe this is a quick question from Mariana asking about dyes. So she's directed this at you, Ciara, but I think, Yoann, it'd be great to hear from you on this as well. What are you doing to reduce the impact of dyes? Is that a material in the materiality sense that you're worried about?
There's a lot. This could be a whole session just on dyes. And there's definitely a team much smarter than me focusing on this, but generally speaking, but when we're making products, we try and choose the most responsible dye stuff, the lowest impact dye, like how can we reduce the number of rinses once a fabric has been dyed? Does it need to be dyed? We have complete programs for basics like sweatsuiting and t-shirts where we're using cut waste, and whatever color the cut waste is, almost like a paint palette, we're just making colors and product. And so we're skipping the dye process. Anything we can do to reduce, we're actively looking at. And then in our circularity work, we're really learning, when it comes to the end of life, the impact dyes and the various types of dyes have on recycling. And a lot of it has very negative impacts that we really weren't foreseeing, or creating challenges, I should say. So that's an ever evolving learning space for us of how do we even incorporate making sure we're using the right dye stuff so that it does not become a hindrance in the future for recycling. So lots to go there, and I'll pass it to Yoann.
Yeah, thank you. So definitely something we are also looking at. Like Ciara, I'm recognizing I'm not the expert on the topic, but obviously when considering raw material choices, you need to have a 360 approach. So it wouldn't make sense, to source the best regenerative wool and then just go with a nasty chemical dye, because of course we want to take consideration inputs at all stages of the production process and the supply chain. So at Kering, we have a dedicated entity around sustainable innovation, which is called the Material Innovation Lab, based in Milan. And it's really exactly what they do. They basically identify innovations, not just on the raw material themselves, but then also on the dyeing and all of the different steps of the supply chain when it comes to ready-to-wear, and then we have a similar innovation platform also for leather, which is also having a lot of chemical inputs around the process. And so, for instance, we have backed and integrated different alternative dyes and innovative dye solutions across the years. And what's interesting is that then we have actually an archive of these solutions physically in Milan, where our designers and our creative teams can go and learn and touch and feel the materials and see that actually the sustainable alternative is as good when it comes to quality and design and aesthetic as the conventional one. So all in all, yes, we do consider that because it has an important impact. Chemical residues and wastewater is, of course, something that we monitor and we want to reduce as well when it comes to environmental impact.
Thank you both. Okay, I think we're going to have time for one more. It will require succinct answers, and I think, but it's a great question. We've touched on this point around regulation. So Sophie Davies, who's just finished her dissertation about the unsustainable nature of the fast fashion industry, asks, do you think policies and regulations will be implemented to ensure more circular fashion, or is the fast fashion industry too cheap and valuable to various economies to boycott it? So here's what I think we do with our limited time. Let's just, everybody gets a chance to answer. You can answer that question or anything else that you thought you were going to get a chance to say during this webinar and didn't, and just want to get out there before we run out of time. You've got less than a minute each. So Tamsin, you're first.
Wow. Well, this is the big deal. I mean, this is the elephant in the room. Both Sophie and Charles have hit on it. We have a capitalist model, the model with which our economy works at the moment rewards growth. It's very lucrative to create low-cost product and sell it and disregard the impacts. Legislation is the answer, and I think it will change it, but how fast can legislation move? And then what can we do in the meantime? And I think it's wonderful we've got Kering in the room, because the EPNL is one of the most exciting opportunities, I think, because it really does create a level playing field. It puts environment alongside cost. And I think that's what we need to be doing through legislation and through the UN. The UN should be requiring a global model by which business operates across the triple bottom line, the way it currently, every country currently requires businesses to meet commercial business regulations, but not social and environmental.
Thanks, Tamsin. Yoann.
So I don't know where Sophie is based. If she's in Europe, she can be very sure that the legislative package coming to us is really tackling this issue. So we have the infamous PEF, we have the infamous PEFCR. I'm sorry if these are all the acronyms. So product environmental footprint, product environmental footprint category key rules. We also have the circular economy package. So actually a lot is actually coming up in the EU, which I think is great. And it's going to challenge some of the brands, let's be honest. Some of the contents of the legislation is quite ambitious. I'm guessing that the UK will probably have similar legislation coming up, and most likely some places in Europe, maybe some of the most progressive states will also align on this. So I think legislation is definitely coming up to back up these movements. I don't think there is some kind of a business protectionisms towards brands that might have more challenges to do that. So I think it's great. I think there is a momentum, but I think regardless of legislation, it is a topic that makes just business sense, as I said before, to tackle for brands. So I definitely think that, and not any brands, and I mean, it's quite obvious for Patagonia, John Lewis, and Kering, we are not waiting for the legislation to take actions, but for the ones who might not be willing, they will have to anyways.
Thanks, Yoann. Ciara.
Yeah, echo what everyone else said. I think legislation is going to be a huge key. Also unlocking funding, because recycling right now of textiles is extremely expensive, time consuming. I've yet to meet a recycler who's like, oh, this is our next business model. This is really profitable. It's usually the opposite. It's a huge pain. So just getting even government support on how to support the recycling infrastructure and collection and building that up, because the profit side is very far out on the horizon. And in the US, we're seeing more bills come up. In California, we have SB 707, that's similar to end producer responsibility, that's being written. And if that passes, hopefully that'll be good momentum, but this is a journey for sure.
Thank you. Catherine, last word.
Yeah, I think just echoing what everyone else has said, I think legislation is coming. Obviously, we're a little bit further behind here in the UK, but we're keeping a close eye on everything that's happening in Europe. And I think what Yoann said about, businesses, some businesses are doing this already. They're doing it ahead of the legislation coming because we know it's the right thing to do. But I also think, just kind of reiterating what I said earlier, as consumers, we have a lot of power as well. So kind of a combination of all three of those things, kind of legislation, businesses doing the right thing, and what we can do as consumers as well.
Perfect. Thank you all very much. While I continue to say my thanks, Rob, if you would get that last slide up there. But Tamsin, Yoann, Ciara, and Catherine, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks so much for sharing so generously both your time and your wisdom. Thanks very much to the audience for your great participation in the chat and in the Q&A. We really, really appreciate you being so engaged and active. If you've enjoyed this webinar series, there's lots more coming from us. We organize a lot of events every year. Coming up, something that I think will be of great interest to everybody. We're doing a series on creating impactful climate transition plans. We hear a lot about net zero targets, science-based targets, a lot about the ambition. We aren't hearing enough about actual concrete, how you're going to do it. And that's what transition plans are all about. We're working with the Transition Plan Task Force to create a series of 3 webinars that are going to hopefully inspire and enable action from companies to turn that ambition into concrete plans. We hope you'll be able to join us for those in May. When this is all over, a survey is going to pop up. We would really appreciate you taking 2 minutes to complete that so that we can continue to make our webinars better and better. Thank you all again for joining, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.